Welcome back to IGN's History of Awesome, a year-by-year breakdown of big events that shape pop culture. Today we're covering 1993, the year Link awakened on Game Boy, Star Fox did a barrel roll on Super Nintendo, and PC gamers started walking through the Myst. As if that weren't enough, Jurassic Park was in theaters, the Power Rangers were on TV, and Magic the Gathering was in the cards. We should probably get this discussion started.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the History of Awesome. This week we're going to be talking about Pogs and America Online. Just kidding. This is 1993 and we don't need to talk about those things. But those things did happen in 1993 along with a lot of other awesome things, which we're going to be talking about. One of those is the most awesome summer movie I think I remember going to back in the day. It was Jurassic Park. It came out June 11th, 1993.
I went to the evening showing the night before with my best friend Robert at the theater we would always go to, and just completely floored. I mean, that movie, right from the word go, is just
absolutely. Jurassic Park, along with Terminator 2, changed what we thought, the way we thought about special effects. Up till then, when you saw a computer-generated effect in a movie, it looked cheesy. It was, some Last Starfighter stuff. You could tell it had been made on a computer. Those dinosaurs.
You could tell it was a computer-generated effect. So usually it was in like a sci-fi movie. You'd see like, oh, that's a computer-generated, cool, like next generation ship looking.
Or the rear projections where they're kind of like moving over the things.
In Jurassic Park, on a big screen with that grain, you could not tell those things weren't real. When you were in that kitchen, those were velociraptors, and the beautiful sound engineering that went along with it, the little tap, 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 and that they were just so well rendered. It was frightening. It was exciting.
To be fair, a lot of them, which people continue this day to say, oh, Jurassic Park 1 looks more real than any of its sequels years later.
There's a reason for that.
Practical effects.
Yeah.
A lot of them.
They combined robots and dinosaurs.
They built a giant robot Tyrannosaurus for that scene. I mean, that's just amazing. And he looks so good when that eyeball comes up with the side of the character, and you just see the iris kind of flare there. Yeah. Oh, it's a great scene.
And it's a combination of all the effects in those scenes, like that whole the scene with the Jeep being rocked. There's every kind of special effect being used in that scene.
Oh yeah, all used with perfect restraint by Steven Spielberg.
Restraint. That's a good point.
Exactly. Some of his best directing of all time. A wonderful combination horror and adventure movie. Some parts of it are absolutely kind of jump scare, Jaws horror. Other parts are, but Jurassic Park is also
that lawyer really gets it.
He does, but it's also filled with a sense of wonder. I mean,
suck it, Jaws fans. That's Spielberg's best movie.
Ooh,
throwing it down.
I like Raiders myself.
Ooh,
Jaws a lot.
Yeah, best Spielberg movie. That's kind of like choosing between your children.
You know what's very similar to Raiders of the Lost Ark in this movie is that it opens with this like very Spielberg mine scene where they're going down in this like mine and they find the amber and they're looking at it, and it's a very Spielberg intro. And I always love the feel of that and the tension before the excitement.
I remember having tears in the theater.
Yeah.
The scene where they first see the dinosaurs, welcome to Jurassic Park, and the John Williams score kicks in. I started crying in the theater. It actually I'm not kidding. It struck me.
Is that because you had already read the book and you were excited about it?
No, I read the book after I saw the movie.
Me too.
I think
here.
Yeah, same here.
But I remember it being very popular. Like I was aware of what Jurassic Park was, and people were reading it.
And that book had a lot of impact. Yeah. It entered. I don't know if anybody in America would know the term paradigm shift if it weren't for that book. It popularized chaos theory, paradigm shift. This is very much. We talk about chaos theory. This was a movie of its time. We have the chaos theory element. We have interactive CD-ROM, or night vision, or
Unix computers.
What's the CD-ROM part?
Oh, that's when they're in the car. So there's like this little CD-ROM screen and little goes away. And there's all these.
That wouldn't work.
Yeah, that's a whole other thing.
It skips so much.
Fun fact, if you're made to be too young to remember, there was no home video release like 3 months later like it is now. The VHS tape didn't come out for like a year.
Yeah.
So I saw the movie several times in the theater, and then it was just this excruciating wait. I pre-ordered at my local video store, pre-ordered the VHS, the home VHS copy.
Yeah.
'Cause remember back then too, the video stores would get it first. To make money renting it before the companies would actually start selling it to consumers.
You couldn't own it probably till Christmas.
No, the only way to own it was to buy a video store copy, which cost like $100.
Yes, it was prohibitively expensive for that exact reason.
But you could play one of many different console games while waiting for it. That's how I really explored what Jurassic Park was. I mean, I read the book, But I remember just like, the Super Nintendo game.
That game was awesome.
It was really neat. It was a top-down Zelda clone with Doom-like first-person scenes. But then the Genesis game was a game where you could play as a Velociraptor and as a side-scroller. And then the Sega CD game was like a point-and-click adventure. They're all so different. I can't imagine that happening now, where it's like, we get ports across consoles, but this was adapted.
Well, we had different architectures to build on, and people, they'd license it out to different companies that produce completely different versions of game.
SNES.
Jurassic Park is perfectly paced, perfectly acted, perfectly scored, perfectly shot. It is virtually a
perfectly
film.
merchandisable.
That's true too.
Yes.
And there were those awesome toys that came out. We talked about the games.
I gotta say, dinosaurs were already really cool when I was a kid, but I think they kind of like faded out a little bit in my interest, and then dinosaurs somehow became cool again, even though I was older. That didn't make sense.
No, that's a big deal because this changed how we looked at dinosaurs in popular culture. I mean, before this movie, people thought of dinosaurs as kind of like slow zombies. After this movie, dinosaurs were fast and agile. The way we think about dinosaurs now is directly influenced by the science and pseudoscience of Jurassic Park. That's a big thing. I mean, that actually affected the way we think about nature.
Also, the idea that dinosaurs, became what we know as birds now was also like a controversy that's presented in that movie, but like it's so widely accepted now. I thought that was really fun.
Back then, that was a completely new thing. Yeah, that's a good point. Also, I'm going to have to confess that after seeing Jurassic Park, I bought a Robert Muldoon hat and a pair of hunting shorts, like
short shorts,
and walked around in them. Yeah,
I'm now picturing that, and I can't unsee it, Jared.
Yeah,
I dressed like Dennis Nedry for the next couple years.
Yeah, I still do.
Right. The Hawaiian shirt.
I'm so glad that Michael Crichton lived to see the incredible success of that film, because he passed away of cancer not too long after, like maybe it was in the late 90s, I believe.
He wrote some other books that were made into stinky movies.
Congo, not a good film.
The Sphere? Is
that the 13th Warrior is actually pretty good. That's worth checking out.
And
which is
of
based
course,
on Eaters of the Dead.
The sequels to
The Lost World was awful, but we'll save that for that. This is History of Awesome.
No, we can talk about it.
Not History of
One
Awful.
thing I thought The Lost World was, in reading the book at the time, like it was an interesting pulpy return to the island. Which
the book was incredible.
The book was very different from the movie.
Very.
It was a post-apocalyptic dinosaur hellscape.
Yes.
Instead of just a contemporary, upkept dinosaur hellscape.
I always got the feeling from that book that that was kind of his cash-in novel. It reads like a Lonesome Dove sequel, where everything's just kind of weird and happening in Bizarro Land. But a lot of people, Ryan loves it.
Yeah, because the whole San Diego thing never happened in the book. They were always on the island. It was like an abandoned, InGen thing. It was really. I like the book a lot more.
The Lost World, the book ends like Dodgson is the main bad guy, and
Dodgson.
He gets the protagonist kicks, like they're hiding under a car and there's a T-Rex, and it just gets kicked out into the open, and the T-Rex just gets him. And in the end of the Lost World film, we're running loose with a T-Rex in San Diego. It's just like, no, it wasn't supposed to be in society.
The villain thing kind of ends the same way, but in different areas.
But while we're still on Lost World, I want to pull it back for a second. Another thing I love about Jurassic Park is how quotable it is.
Oh, yeah.
That's
clever girl.
Yeah, clever girl. Exactly. Or Dotson. We got Dotson here. Or how many other things?
I hate computers.
That is one big pile of
life finds a way.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, Jeff Goldblum doing, this, like his sexy pose.
The whole chaos theory exchange now, that's one thing in which I don't think it holds up, but I love it. I don't think, it's so corny. But it's still so fun to watch, and I accept it because it's part of my childhood and loving that movie. Favorite scenes, we got to tell them.
Okay. I think my favorite, hands down, and this is very stereotypical, is the wonderful conversation with Richard Attenborough when they're eating the ice cream. That exchange, going back and forth about the flea circus, that's beautiful filmmaking. It really is. That's just a powerful, dramatic scene in the middle of a horror movie, and it's very well done, talking about dreams, about power, about what he was trying to do, about what we can and can't accomplish in the world around us.
Yeah. Mine is the educational film.
Mr. DNA?
Yeah.
Mr. DNA?
Yeah.
It's a Dino DNA!
Oh,
we filled the hole
using sophisticated methods and virtual reality.
I think they imply that they used frogs and then dug up dinosaurs, and that's how that happened.
Yeah, they filled the gaps. Mine was the clever girl. Just the way that scene reversed itself.
That is a funny puppet. Yeah. When those velociraptors come out the side of him, it's like, it's just a guy with it on his hand.
Yeah.
I've got to go with the approach to Jurassic Park, largely because of the John Williams score. But
my gosh!
As they're coming
Isla
in,
Nublar,
and it's just like, oh, it's happening now. And it's just that movie was so real at the time.
And when you go to Hawaii
real.
now, you're like, oh.
Yeah,
this is
good old
how they did
Kauai.
this.
How
It
did
looks
none,
exactly like where it was filmed.
How did none of us say the kitchen? Which is probably the most iconic scene in the
well,
thing.
you know.
That's,
It's a great scene.
Yeah.
It's a great
That's
scene.
like one of those end scenes in a movie where, like, by the time I got to that, I'm just like, I'm thinking about all the other great stuff that happened. So I
okay.
never think
Oh,
about
when
it.
I watched, I was like, they are going to die. They are going to die. Oh.
Speaking of dying, I died a lot in a game that came out that very year, although much later in the year, Doom.
Oh.
Nice segue, by
Thank
the way.
you. Thank you very much. Doom meant so much to me growing up. It was the first time I really cared about playing like a cutting-edge, really cool, high-graphic game on PC. Before that, I was such a console player.
I'd been playing video games since I was probably 6, 7 years old. Friends had Nintendo. I eventually got my Nintendo. Moved on to the 16-bit era, Genesis. I had separately a TurboGrafx at one point. But when Doom came out, and I played it at a friend's house who had a computer, I then begged and pleaded for us to get our first family computer, because we didn't have one at the time.
Mom, you can keep your recipes on it.
Doom was the game that I became a PC gamer for over 10 years because of Doom.
Yeah.
Yeah, it fulfilled the promise that Wolfenstein had given us just a little bit before. I mean, Wolfenstein was kind of a great proof of concept, and we saw, well, how can you do that on a computer? It was so fast and so colorful and so quick. And then Doom came out, and we looked at that and went, how do you do that on a computer?
I completely missed Wolfenstein, so Doom just blew my mind.
Same here. Doom was like, even today, I don't see half of the stuff that Doom did, and Doom did it right. Like, you don't see like these huge open world, like first-person maze-like levels with keys, secret areas everywhere,
Monsters fighting each other.
Monster infighting.
It added such a believability to this weird like alien invasion hellscape where they don't even like each other. They definitely don't like me.
Even today, it's just like that's a feature. If a game's like, oh, we have monster fights, like, wow, really? It's like that should be a staple, but you don't see
pretty
that.
uncommon.
And that unbelievable sense of speed that game allowed. I mean, you just rocketed. Even walking, you were moving faster than most characters move running in first-person shooters now.
I read somewhere, I think somebody had broken it down and figured it out, that you're running at what the real-world equivalent of 40 miles an hour.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Something like that.
It does feel like you were just ricocheting off walls. Like
But
when
it
I was
feels
testing
good.
like
That's
walls,
with a
you walk
chainsaw.
through walls a lot in that game. I just remember bouncing off of everything. You're moving so fast.
And that's, oh, go ahead.
No, please.
Well, that's part of what was so striking about it. Remember that at the time we thought of PCs as a place you played strategy games. PCs were, even though they were very powerful, they were not known for action games. This thing was faster and more responsive than anything we'd ever seen on a computer, or for that matter, on a console in most cases.
And, and it was free.
Shareware.
How did that happen?
Shareware is a concept that was common in the day, and Doom popularized it, that if you mentioned it to a CEO now, who probably doesn't know, which, maybe he wasn't in the business, shareware, if you mentioned it to a game company CEO now, he would look at you like you were from another planet or had a third eye. A quarter of Doom was given away for free.
Yep.
A quarter of it.
And enough of it that you felt like you were having a beginning, middle, and end experience. I mean, you got to the end of the Doom.
The
and there
Barons
was a big
of Hell
boss,
with the
boss
two Barons
situation.
of Hell.
Was
And
there
then-
any multiplayer in the shareware version? Because I think there was deathmatch in it.
Oh,
I believe
not
so.
only was there was deathmatch, and not only that, but they found ways to make deathmatch really the point of the thing by the end. I mean, people played through Doom.
So
and then go ahead.
It's worth. Doom literally invented deathmatch.
Yeah, the term deathmatch is from Doom.
And
there-
multiplayer in a first-person shooter. Of course, the genre
adding
itself
up
was young,
kills
but
as the way
yeah,
you do it.
Doom invented it.
Yeah, and that was
And
an
it worked too.
Oh, it worked so well.
Like, I
It
remember
worked-
hearing about it and being like, there's no way that works. Because I used the internet a lot. I was like, there's no way a game like Doom could possibly work.
This is back in the basically the pre-internet days, 1993, where we had 14.4 dial-up modems. And there was a service that I joined called DWANGO, Dial-Up Wide Area Network Gaming Organization. And there would be, this is back when, of course, there were long-distance phone charges. So there was I lived in the Phoenix area. There was a Phoenix server for DWANGO. So I subscribed to that, because if you dialed into one of the other ones, it's just long distance. It was just cost your mom would be like, what is this? What is this phone bill? And you could go on there and play you could chat and hook up games with other people and play 4 players. But otherwise, you had to take your 2 computers, go over the modem, which editing init strings. That was another
That's a
fun
whole other thing. Yeah, just try to set this up.
Yeah, or you get your 2 computers together, you haul all your monitor, your tower, everything to your buddy's house.
Party.
It was a dorm room.
Not even a LAN party though.
Yeah,
you use
before.
the COM ports. It was a serial connection.
Yeah.
Direct 9-pin to 9-pin.
So it's unbelievable that Doom ever made money, and it made a lot of money.
Yeah.
And
The creators owned Ferraris,
right,
famously.
they were famous game developers.
Yep.
Like their names were known. It was really great. You've talked to them and met them, and everybody should check out our Doom Let's Play with John Romero.
Legitimately one of the things I'm proudest of in my career. That
great.
if 14-year-old me, if I could go back and tell him, hey, at some point you're going to play through all of the shareware episode of Doom with John Romero, the guy that designed all the levels.
So
I would have been like, what? Who are you?
Yeah.
So Doom made money somehow. Myst made the most money out of any game in the 90s, and until Sims came out. Myst, the best-selling PC game of the decade.
For good reason.
We attribute The Matrix to being the killer app for DVDs. Myst was basically the killer app for the CD-ROM drive.
It was the reason why you got a CD-ROM drive, or why you could convince your parents to get it, because it was marketed to adults.
Yeah.
It was a video game that, this was rare for the era. Sometimes you would market games to adults that were like bawdy, like Leisure Suit Larry or something like that. But this was a puzzle game for people that could own computers and not perhaps own an NES.
Myst pretty much got my dad into gaming, and I would play with him. We would just kind of solve these puzzles. It was just an amazing game for its time. Like, even still, it stands up. I could go back and play and still be blown away. The atmosphere, the crazy, like the non-story exploration you have of being dropped from this island and seeing like all these weird machines and buildings. What does any of this mean? And there's nobody there. That was probably the most unsettling thing.
Well, no story.
It's really just, it's a hypercard stack. You know, it's a group of interlinked documents and images and movie files, and they found a way to sequence that into a game.
To explain what Jared's saying, it's basically a slideshow.
Right.
A series of pre-rendered images.
Yeah, and but interactive in really great ways.
Yeah.
But it's not it's not a landmark 3D experience anymore. Like Doom is kind of amazing to see it in motion.
Yeah.
But Myst at the time was this kind of aesthetic that people associated with 3D graphics, even though they were pre-rendered and it was just an image. It looked like a 3D thing that you were exploring. It really felt like
Yeah, and because of that CD medium, there was enough space to store all that for the first time, and that's what really made it work. You couldn't have done that on a disk-based system before. You just couldn't have distributed a game with that much raw data in it, and that's why it worked so well and popularized the medium.
Does anyone remember the name of the sequel to Myst?
Yeah, Riven.
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 What a strange name.
Riven: the
Myst.
sequel to Myst.
Oh, really?
That's the name. The name of the sequel to Myst is Riven: the sequel to Myst.
There's been just some remakes of Myst too, where it's actually rendered out in 3D and stuff like that. But it's funny to revisit. Brandon and I put in the Myst disc to a contemporary computer today, and the only thing we were able to actually do with that was open up the QuickTime files, because all of the stored videos.
See all the little the letter notes from the books.
We saw there was real acting in it, of course, from the brothers and the father, where they're yelling at you to find pages.
Yeah. Well, that's most.
I just remember exploring. Like, I never got anywhere in that game,
It was
but I played
weird.
a lot.
It was so empty, but I could not shake this feeling, like this unsettling feeling that someone was watching me. And I guess because I played games where there's always enemies, I'm like, where are they? They're gonna jump out at me. I go in like this tree world, and you'd see like these huts where people live. Like, okay, where did they go?
Yeah.
This is getting kind of creepy. And
It's a creepy game.
Yeah.
It is. It's very creepy. There's kind of this minimal ambient sound going on the whole time. It's very well done there. There were very few ways to die, as you pointed out. You didn't have a lot to interact with until you get to the end of the game. It's almost impossible to die, and I think that's some of what attracted people to it. Most of what I remember about Myst is being angry. At some of the puzzles.
It's frustrating.
And
you can fail to a wall. That's when you have to get on AOL or your local news groups and figure out what you're doing.
Yeah,
Or you can buy a strategy
I had a
guide,
book
which I had.
of notes. Me and my dad.
Oh, really? That's
yeah.
cool.
My dad and I, we would just like write
Man,
notes.
I'd love to see those. I love.
We're in
people's
this
notes
world
they
now.
did.
Can't find out how to get past this one wall.
Yep.
So Doom had a very peculiar approach to 3D that was really fast, interesting. Myst froze 3D and just used the aesthetic of 3D, but Star Fox used actual polygonal graphics, rendered them in real time on a freaking Super Nintendo.
Yeah.
Well, like the sell at the time from Sega was, hey, buy a Sega CD so you can have better games. Buy a 32X so you can see these games rendered in 3D. And then Star Fox put it all on a chip and it worked on the system you already had.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, something we forget about in this age of downloadable media or optical media is that you could use a cartridge to power up your console. You could give it capabilities it did not previously have through hardware, and that's what they did with Star Fox. They created the Super FX chip, and suddenly your Super Nintendo can do things that it just should not have been capable of. That game, software and hardware-wise, is a feat of brilliant engineering. It's probably the most technically impressive thing.
Yeah, Dylan Cuthbert and Argonaut, an expat that worked on some other amazing 3D games.
Yeah.
There was a game called X on Game Boy.
Oh, X is nuts.
As impressive as Star Fox. It never came out in the United States, which is inexplicable to me. It was a Japanese-only release, but it was rendered polygonal graphics on the Game Boy.
Yeah.
Like, the things people got out of cartridges were just incredible.
I remember just being completely blown away by that technology at the time. It was just like, whoa, this is nuts.
You can't do this. What is this?
And that soundtrack, just that it's a great arcade game. It really is. Nintendo hasn't made games for arcades in a long time, but Star Fox is as throwback a mid-80s arcade game as you can make. It really is. It would have been completely in place alongside some other arcade classic machines.
It kind of looked like iRobot, the first polygonally designed game too.
Yeah.
I remember there was so much hype around the game because Shigeru Miyamoto worked with the team on making it into a kind of a he liked Thunderbird, so he put puppets on the cover.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of development and thought that went into the characters and the world and stuff, which it all ended up a little bit silly. But Nintendo Power had a big campaign. Do you guys remember there was a cutout R-wing in Nintendo Power?
I do. Yes.
Where you folded it together and it made the polygonal ship. I thought that was so clever because you're making a papercraft polygonal thing, and it was like a celebration of the polygon. It was like and in movies like Lawnmower Man stuff at the time, which were showing what CG graphics should look like in contemporary technology, where it always looked like Star Fox.
It really looked good. It was good art design, good production design, sitting there and saying, what can we do with this limited capability and make something that actually flows well and looks neat on the screen. They did well. And I like the point you made earlier about Doom. Doom faked 3D. Myst gave us still image 3D. And then we have Star Fox with truly rendered 3D, but very primitive. All ways of working around technical limitations, all extremely successful. It's amazing what you can have. Sometimes when you can't do everything you want, you can make something better. And I think all three of those games are examples of that.
Absolutely. Another game that's the perfect example of that is The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening on Game Boy. You take a team that's making one of the greatest games of all time, Zelda, A Link to the Past, and they have an after-hours project of porting that game, a cutting-edge, amazing Super Nintendo game, to the Game Boy, the black and white handheld at the time. And what do? They do it. They make it work. Yeah. And then they're like, we could just make an original game out of this, and they're given the go-ahead to do that. That's the origin of perhaps the best Game Boy game. Now, my favorite Game Boy game, I think, would be Tetris. What about you guys? Is it Link's Awakening?
It's Link's Awakening for me, definitely.
Link's Awakening is your favorite Game Boy game of all?
Yeah.
It's hard to argue with that. I mean, Tetris was, of course, the killer app for the system. That's why people bought it. But, Link's Awakening is really difficult to argue with.
It's technologically impressive, and it's just such a wacky Zelda game.
It has such a great story for being, not what you would expect from a Zelda game. There was no Ganon. There was no Zelda. You were on this island. You had no idea what was going on. There was some sort of fish, but there was a giant egg in a mountain.
I love the windfish.
Yeah, and the people you met along the way, it was kind of almost like Potato Majora's Mask of the townspeople had an integral part. And then they also had the weird thing. So there was references to Chain Chomps. There was references to Kirby, to Mario. There was a Yoshi doll.
Yeah, it's kind of Nintendo letting their hair down. And I don't know if that's because it was on a portable system and they just didn't care as much. But it
started a tradition of that on portable Zelda games being a little bit off.
And it worked. It worked so well. And it's so melancholy. I mean, you get to the end of that game and wow,
I felt such
what a
jerk.
punch in the gut. It's really well done.
Link destroys the world.
And all these friends now, they're gone.
Actually, it's funny you mentioned the small town Majora's Mask vibe. That was all apparently a tribute to Twin Peaks.
That makes sense.
Which is such a cultural phenomenon at the time, but it's something I would have never linked to Link's Awakening, which I think is really cool.
I also really love the soundtrack. That was before we had the internet to find music. I would just carry on the Game Boy, go to Telltale Heights, plug in my headphones and just listen to it and just do something else. That was my perfect soundtrack.
And some old games are hard to go back to. Link's Awakening isn't. You can play it just as happily today as you did when it was new, and it's still impressive.
And they had the DX color version.
Yeah, that version's really nice with the
own
color
dungeon.
dungeon. Yeah, they color in the late '90s. It was colored and put back out for Game Boy Color, and now I think that's the version you play on Virtual Console. One thing that always sticks out to me when I go back to play though is that I have to pause and switch stuff so much. With 2 buttons, it limits you to how much you have to change your weapons.
That's true.
You can have 3 Ocarina songs to switch between.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of iconic music,
Like the Boy Scouts of Hell. Just really, really frightening stuff.
right in the middle of 1993, the X-Files debuted, and it was a hit right away. The pilot was very. I think the reviews at the time were very skeptical about the pilot in 1993, but the first season, oh man, did that show take off! And I watched the premiere. I don't know if you guys remember, it was a Friday night event, and Fox had promoted it for a while. But at the time, there was a lot of
That was young Fox, too.
Yeah, it was alien dissections, specials, and unsolved mysteries were kind of a thing on TV at the time. And boy, did that for some reason appeal to me. I don't know why.
It's a fusion of a classic storytelling medium. You've got the believer and the skeptic, both of which are likable, both of which are constantly in tension.
Yep.
And then you throw in aliens, mutants, ghosts, and everything else in the world.
Government conspiracies.
Government conspiracies. Throw those things together. It's television gold.
Yeah, and then of course, adding to all of the mythology and great stuff they did, they just reduce episodes to Monster of the Week, and that's where that term came from.
Oh, Freak of the Week.
Yeah, and it just every week there'd be unless it was there was a difference between the mythology episodes and the monster episodes, and I just loved that idea that people started. I remember just cataloging Fluke Man and the Fiji Mermaid and like all these things is like. It was every type of sci-fi topic or paranormal topic was covered, but it never seemed like it was being rolled out in some like careful cataloged way. Everything had such a great spin.
Yeah,
on
it felt really natural the way they introduced these different like little one-off episodes of like, here's our kind of version of like Bigfoot or kind of like something in the woods, or here's like the guy who can crawl through like grates and like listen.
Some weird
to
ones too. The Jersey Devil. How'd that happen?
Oh yeah.
I made them
come up in the second season.
I made the mistake of getting too deep into the mythologies. I was a Krychek guy. If Krychek was on, I was there.
Poor guy lost his arm.
He did, but it didn't stop him from being awesome. And I really liked Krychek, and he was around for kind of the whole arc of the show.
He was Mulder's nemesis.
He was his nemesis, and I enjoyed that.
He was first his partner.
And eventually, the X-Files definitely lost its way, but when it was good, it was really, really good.
Yeah, I feel like the point in which it lost its way was probably right after the movie, though I really liked how the movie tied into the series at the time. I thought it was really interesting. There was the bees that were being introduced and the black ooze and stuff like that, but they all kind of came together in the movie, but the movie was standalone. But then at the end, Mulder sees a UFO like rise out of the ice, and then that doesn't change everything.
No,
it's so frustrating that he always sees stuff, and then
now we're going back to it for 6 episodes.
That's exciting.
Yeah, me too.
I can't help it. They've got me on the hype train. I want to see what happens.
Yeah. One thing that was remarkable about X-Files for me was that Mulder and Scully were always. There was this love relationship that was hinted at, and eventually they actually caved in on that. But their relationship was professional and platonic for so much of that series. And what a cool thing that was.
Yeah, to have a male and female character that
romance.
That just happened to be coworkers and friends.
Great chemistry.
Yeah.
Like together. Like every scene they were in, where they just like, be on a bed like in a hotel eating pizza together, just watching like TV, waiting for the next case. Like, that stuff, like this moment to moment, it was really, really wonderful to see.
Also, let's not forget Skinner making bald sexy on TV.
Yeah, Skinner, the Lone Gunman.
Yeah. Oh yeah, the Lone Gunmen were great. Those were wonderful characters.
They were good characters. They were so caught in that time period, though, of getting online and cyberpunk and hacking.
I'm in.
Yeah. But it was such. Like it did seem cheesy at the time too. Like it was kind of a parody of that.
But that's what I liked about them actually. I felt like the X-Files did well when it went dark and serious, but I also felt like it did well when it remembered that it was hearkening back to the Outer Limits, for example. And a little bit of schlock is good on a show about evil monsters from outer space every now and then.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite episode?
Yeah. I have so many favorite episodes, and I've been thinking about this a lot. And I think at this point in my life, I like Clyde Bruckman's Final Repose the best. That's the one where Peter Boyle predicts the deaths of people.
Oh,
but the thing is, I really like the funny episodes. So I just think that episode's so creepy and great, and I love the implication that that Mulder dies from autoerotic asphyxiation. I think that's really funny. But I thought there was a really spooky moment in that where Scully asks if she's going to die, and he says, "You don't." And I always thought that'd be great if they mixed that back into the mythology.
And of course, they kind of dropped it. But again, that's the decline end. I really like, it's not the best episode of X-Files, but my favorite is the one that David Duchovny directed where the alien is hiding in the Negro Leagues. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah, I remember that one.
That's a wonderful, I just love that idea so much. That's such a Twilight Zone-ish Rod Serling conceit, and I thought it was brilliant. I really enjoyed it.
For me, it has to be Jose Chung's from Outer Space.
I was going to say, that's one of the funnier ones that I really like. Lord Kinbote.
One of the funniest, has so many good tie-ins from the alien smoking a cigar and like the...
or the alien saying, like, this is not happening.
Yeah.
This is not happening.
And then when they're interviewing the conspiracy theorist guy and he's talking about the FBI just being aliens, he's talking about Scully and Mulder. I'm sorry.
Whoa, that's cool.
I had a really
all
weird
do
thing.
that.
Scully and Mulder, and then they're like, they were so like faceless and impassioned. And the only time they acted was when Mulder saw the body, and he just like made this yelp. It was the funniest yelp I've ever heard.
And there's another story in which they tell each other's stories with Luke Wilson in it about vampires, and I always thought those were similar. Also, Alex Trebek is in that episode.
I've forgotten that.
There's a lot of guests in those episodes.
That episode, what's great about that is that it's all about the concept of how people feel they've been abducted. Where does that come from? And there's these people, that are remembering being abducted, but it turns out they're not really. That's not really what they're not really remembering aliens, and it's really cool, like using the real world explanations of abductions and mixing them in with what's happening in that.
Got one?
You have a favorite?
I only watched it every now and again. I wasn't a diehard, so
it's okay.
I saw the movie.
Just say Home. That'll please the audience.
Home it is.
That's the one with the inbred family. I don't know if you ever saw that.
Oh, the Peacock episode?
And the Peacock family. They set up a series of traps in their house, and there's a really disturbing intro.
The Cops parody was good too.
Yeah,
that was
people
great.
always bring up that one. I probably saw that. I know I saw it live when it was on, but it's about a bug rampaging through the ghetto, right?
No, it was about like this basically like this fear, like incarnate.
Oh yeah, but so everybody sees a different fear.
Yeah, and it was hilarious when it would turn into different people. Like someone would think about a werewolf, like, well, wait, what are you talking about, a werewolf? And then you get attacked by a werewolf.
Yeah.
I just love that because I hated Cops so much. Not the profession, but the show.
Yes.
I hated that show, and so seeing it just kind of savaged by its own network, I enjoyed immensely.
That's true. It was on their own network. There's a Simpsons crossover too.
Absolutely. Mulder and Scully exist canonically in the Simpsons universe.
Yeah. We can't go to the end of this discussion without discussing Humbug, which I think would also come up for one of my favorite episodes. This is an episode in which circus performers become, one of them is implicated in a crime. It's not him, but they have to go through and figure out who's doing a crime in a circus camp, in a freaks camp, as they call it in the show. It's so fantastic, and it features real life freaks and geeks, and some of them are just great. And then, of course, the Fiji mermaid turns out to be the killer.
Oh, spoilers.
Spoiler alert. But what is the Fiji mermaid? That's what the spoiler is.
Oh, okay. There we go.
Yeah. Okay, so X-Files, wonderful. Many seasons of X-Files. I did not watch any of these seasons, but I do remember them, and I know my little sister loved Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. Brendan, tell us about
Take it away.
Near and dear to my heart. Yeah, like when that, I'm pretty sure like that hit in the height of ninja martial arts of like we had the Turtles movies coming out, live action. We had Three Ninjas.
Don't say the Three Ninjas. Come on.
I will say Three Ninjas.
Yeah? Were you a big Three Ninjas fan?
Wow.
Yes. I learned between Three Ninjas, the Mutant Turtles, and Power Rangers, I learned that the force of your blow can be amplified by going, "Aya!" That would take so much power. And I think that all of like Taekwondo camps saw their numbers skyrocket during that period because everybody I knew watching the Power Rangers went and took like a little year of Taekwondo.
See for me, Karate Kid did that. It converted everybody.
It was also the most 90s thing possible. 5 teenagers with attitude by this crazy Zordon, and there was a witch on the moon, and they're like, hey, let's go fight in these crazy costumes. That's not good enough. Let's get these giant mechanical, like a T-Rex and the pterodactyl. That's not going to be, let's get a giant robot and go all out and Voltron on them.
Brendan, did they ever explain why they don't just turn into the robot at the beginning and step on the bad guys before they get big?
Pacing.
Okay, pacing.
Every
that's
episode followed the same formula, and you could see it coming, but you loved it.
That's like Voltron too. It's like they wait till the end of the episode to form the lions up.
And they actually took a lot of their the stock footage from a Japanese show, the Super Sentai series.
Right, which is, there are iterations of that still on in Japan. I used to watch it in Japan.
Still Mighty Morphin Power Rangers on.
Still Mighty Morphin Power Rangers on, right.
Did you understand that when you were watching it originally, that it was like a repurposed Japanese show?
idea.
Yeah,
I just knew it was awesome.
Really?
Yeah, I knew that. I think I looked it up somewhere, ran into it in a magazine or something. My brother was way into it. It was not my thing at all, but it was constantly on in my house because of that. And it was amazing to just kind of grow up and watch him so riveted by it. And I think, it's easy to understand. I liked Voltron as a kid. It's color-coded fighters and giant robots are cool. And the fact that it didn't make any sense didn't really matter because there were sparks and special effects and explosions.
Solving problems with violence.
What's that?
Solving problems with violence. There was a lot of controversy.
Did Power Rangers ever die?
No, but they were kind of like the rotating cast. Like they would be going.
I remember there was a White Ranger that was introduced later.
Yeah, like
really
they
cool
introduced a Green Ranger, and he was kind of like the antithesis. Like he was the rival. He got like mind control, and then eventually became the White Ranger and became a good guy. And then they go into a new season where it'd be a different bunch of teenagers, and then they kind of like get a new setup and a new thing. But it was always like they would rotate them out.
So were there originals that everybody liked though?
I think the original cast holds a special place in some people's hearts. Yeah,
for me,
absolutely.
I think it was always like the first couple of seasons for me that were like the most ones I cherished the most.
And was there only one girl?
No, there were two girls.
There were Yellow
There were two
Ranger and the
girls.
Pink Ranger.
Yeah, they were both girls. I don't think we can go past this without me sharing a really weird story about the Power Rangers. When I was living in Japan just a few years ago, I was exploring a downtown shopping area, and I went up a flight of stairs where I saw a sign, and I walked into a store probably the size of a small mom-and-pop video store that was entirely dedicated to Power Rangers erotica and costumes. That was all they sold was Power Rangers erotica.
Shoulder to shoulder packed with customers?
Yeah, 3 rooms of Power Rangers erotica full of people buying it.
No way.
That's all they sold. That was a strange moment in my life.
Well, if you knew the name, we could endorse it right now. But.
Yeah, no, it's in Nagoya.
It's funny because the controversy wasn't from that, crazy as it is. It was more from the solving problems with violence. I think it was actually...
How is that a controversy?
I don't know.
Power Rangers?
Parents don't like when you solve problems with violence. So I think Canada took it off the air, New Zealand took it off the air. There was a lot of like protests and like call-ins to the news stations and like I forget who was broadcasting. I think it was Fox Kids.
Yeah.
A lot of angry people going like, you got to make it different. I think actually in the second season they brought in like a really like a new bad guy, and he was so like grimdark that they had to bring back the other bad guy because he was too like
bad.
adult.
Well, it's people are always looking for the wrong place, I think, to attribute the behavior of society at its worst. At Power Rangers and Doom, this is a year with a lot of violence in it, and people just were looking for scapegoats.
But the biggest scapegoat of all, hands down, 1993, a little show called Beavis and Butthead.
Now you're speaking my language, Sam.
Yeah, that show was attributed to a fire that caused some deaths. Now, in hindsight, that was BS. That was not a true thing. The kid did not watch Beavis and Butthead. But as a consequence of that, we got the warning. Right?
Beavis and Butthead are not people. They're cartoons.
They're not even human. They're cartoons.
One of the most wonderful things ever was that intro.
And then I think they took out some of the fire jokes.
Well, they stopped. Yeah, Beavis no longer went fire, fire. Although they would make jokes or they would make references to it. Like there's one episode where they're at the burger place and he's saying fryer, fryer.
Yeah. They would poke, and that's what made Beavis and Butthead great. It was so lowbrow that it was highbrow.
Yes,
Mike Judge. That's totally it.
Yeah, he's a freaking genius.
Most people loved. Their favorite part of Beavis and Butthead were the parts where they're riffing on MTV music videos. Like their favorite band was Gwar!
Which you can't watch anymore.
Right.
There's no way to watch those music video sequences, which of course are a nod to Mystery Science Theater 3000 and riffing, one of our favorite shows. I love it so much, and I love Beavis and Butthead for that. But I also like the cartoons.
Yeah, that's the thing. A lot of people liked the music video portions. I like the actual plot lines of the show.
They're good. Yeah.
The whole thing was started from a Mike Judge short called Frog Baseball.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then MTV picked it up and they.
Well, it kind of it was on Liquid Television too, right? There were some shorts on this cartoon roundup on MTV of indie cartoons. Which, can you even imagine MTV doing that now?
No.
The indie cartoon roundup with Ian Flux and all the other stuff on it.
It's difficult for me to imagine them doing anything I'd want to watch at this point. But,
but everybody watches MTV when they're 12 or 13.
Beavis and Butthead got so big that there was a feature-length film, Beavis and Butthead Do America, in '96. And not only, it was actually very good. It was a very good film. It was funny, very funny, and it made money. It actually made money. And then weirdly, after years and years, just like 2 or 3 years ago, MTV and Mike Judge brought the series back.
Yep.
And I remember I watched it eagerly.
Yeah, they watched live action or reality TV.
Yeah, and I just felt like, I don't know if it was me that had gotten older, which of course is true, but I just kind of felt like, oh, the moment has passed. Like it didn't really click with me. Not that it was bad.
My parents were really not into Beavis and Butthead. And so I would go over to a friend's house, and I just remember staying up so late, because MTV would air it, then air Headbangers Ball, then maybe air another episode, and you just see the same episodes over and over. But I have such great memories of playing games like, Star Fox in 1993, and just really late at night, staying up all night watching Beavis and Butthead. It's the best feeling.
If you watch Beavis and Butthead, the neighbor, Tom Anderson, I believe his name is, basically the same voice that would become, that would
also looks like him, too.
Damn it, you boys, get out of my tool shed.
Which, as much as I love Beavis and Butthead, King of the Hill is brilliant. That might be my favorite television
series.
Probably
what he's made. What he's made the most
Not
money
a
on
fan.
over the years.
I'm a big fan of King of the Hill.
I can't stand
Beavis and
King of the
Butthead
Hill.
is just a great moment in time. I miss it.
Oh, me too. I think it ran for long enough that it touched a lot of other people. But it also, I grew out of it. I remember growing out of it.
I was the exact right age when Beavis. I was a young teen. Like I think it started in '93, so I was 13. From when I was 13 to like 16.
You and I were about the right age. We were in middle school, the right age. An entire generation of people my age with their T-shirts stretched out from putting them over their heads. Yeah,
I need TP for my mama.
I guess I'm just.
Cornholio was a great gag.
The thing where
when he just walks out of the classroom,
or where they're going to get kicked out of school if they laugh, and then the next day sex ed starts, and it's sex ed week, and they're just sitting there holding, and then you have they're sitting through all the jokes and all the innuendo. And then they go outside and start laughing, and the sun goes down and comes back up. They can't.
I got to mention real quick too, just because it's just history of awesome. There was a Beavis and Butthead point-and-click adventure game called Beavis and Butthead in Virtual Stupidity that was actually published by Viacom. I can't even tell you who the developer was, but it was written. I don't know if it was actually written, but it was voiced by Mike Judge. It looked like the show, and it was a Monkey Island classic point-and-click adventure-style game. Phenomenal, just an incredible adventure game, and no one really remembers it. And I don't even think you can get it anymore because who owns the rights? Where is it? But I still have my original disc. Just look it up.
Let's pop it in after we get out of this.
It belongs in a museum.
It does, but Beavis and Butthead in Virtual Stupidity. If you like, point and click classic adventure games,
don't play the Super Nintendo.
That is the one to look up.
So we're gonna end this episode with the end of an era for Batman. In 1983, Batman got his back broken by Bane in Batman 500. And I followed that whole series. I was very into Batman at the time. I know Batman's one of your favorite characters ever, but there was this thing that happened where Superman died and then got turned into 4 different Superman when it was really obvious which Superman was the real one because he was just wearing sunglasses. But
someone made of steel.
But right after that, Batman had this big thing happen, and he didn't die, but this character Bane that was introduced.
Take up the mantle.
That's right, and Batman was paralyzed for a while until magic fixed him. Is that what happened?
I don't remember the specifics. It's been a while, but yeah, it was something happened. His back repaired itself, and then he was like.
I vividly remember the cover. Yeah, I was just gonna say the cover of him. Yeah, just like. Bent over Bane's knee.
Yeah, and Bane has been depicted in 2 different movies now.
Very badly the first time.
Yeah, and differently, but well, I think in the third Dark Knight movie. But he's huge in the comics, like really funny.
But even though he's big, what I like about this is that this is when he was still kind of the anti-Batman. He had that kind of. Bane's shown as being more thuggish, but in the comic at that period of time, he was much more Ra's al Ghulish. He was an intellectual equal to Batman, he was a Professor Moriarty to Batman's Sherlock Holmes. And so a lot of that plot line really plays into that well, and that's why I enjoyed this book. Batman Year One's my favorite Batman book, I think, but this is still a really, really good one.
The way he goes about beating Batman is not just that backbreaking moment. It's what leads up to that moment. Yeah. He sets all of Arkham loose, and he waits. He knows nobody can beat Batman one-on-one. It's impossible. But with prep time, Batman beats everybody. So I'll just throw all these supervillains at him, the Joker, the Riddler, Scarecrow, throws everybody at him, and he just wears them down bit by bit, and he sees it happening, because Batman's having this midlife crisis where he's trying to train up Jean-Paul Valley, who becomes Azrael, as a crime fighter, and it's not really working out, kind of. So like he's getting tired, he's beating all these people, he doesn't ask for help. He leaves Robin aside, Robin, I got this. And then by the end, he's just like so worn out, physically, emotionally, that Bane comes in and just like he breaks into the Wayne Manor, and then just totally, there was like a spiritual breaking too.
Yeah.
So it was like, hey, you're physically and mentally broken. And you know, people freaked out.
So if you walked into a comic book store in 1993, most of the Batman comics were taken over by this at the time. Image was everywhere. Marvel was doing Maximum Carnage, this totally funny Spider-Man crossover series. But a lot of people were squatted on the floor in the corner doing something. And I never participated in this. But what they were doing is they were playing Magic the Gathering, which also launched in 1993.
Bunch of nerds.
Okay,
Did you guys play this right when it started?
No, not right when it started. I jumped in a little bit later, but still very early in the fray. Were you there from the beginning?
No, it was about maybe like 3-4 years after, 96, 97.
So Magic the Gathering was exceptional. They had this Richard Garfield, this mathematician, had this neat idea. What if I created a very understandable, comprehensible, elegant, mathematically based game that instead of having a standard deck of cards that everybody plays out of, let's let each person customize their abilities. It's sort of like crafting your own weapon within the rules of the game. And then you and your friend would face off, and you tested both your skills at playing the game and your skills at preparation. It's almost like playing an RPG video game.
So this is the first time you built a deck?
Yeah, it was the most, it popularized that.
Okay.
I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
And it just exploded. You were sitting there like, well, I could try this, and I could try this. And at the beginning, when it was kind of Wild West, nobody knew what to do.
Yeah.
But very quickly, magazines emerged around it, back when we still had those, and little communities and message boards, and people would start comparing ideas. And then the Duelist Convocation was formed that sort of regulated and said, okay, here's the minimum number of cards you can have. Here are cards that are banned or restricted, so you can only use certain amounts of them.
It was a Wild West. My favorite memory, I was just getting into it, and at the time, my sister's first boyfriend, who was 6 years older, he was like, oh, you're getting into Magic the Gathering? And I was like, yeah. I was like, oh, I used to play that when it first came out. I'm like, I don't play anymore. Here you go. Because it's this giant box full of Magic cards.
Isn't that like $3,000 worth of Magic cards?
Possibly now, yes.
Maybe. I don't. They're like all like because they would always reprint new ones, and they would like fix errors. So like I have like an original like fire breathing. It doesn't say until end of turn, but now that's standardized. So like there was all these really old like rare cards, just really crazy cards.
Yep.
Yeah.
And like I would just dump them on the floor, bring my friends over, hey, let's all make decks, and then play them, and then just make new ones.
And that was the fun of it, because you had your community of friends, and the game was so adaptable. You could play it one-on-one easily. You could play it with 12 people
Did you
easily.
take other people's Magic cards?
Okay, originally you did. In the rules, you were supposed to ante up the top card of your deck, and you gambled for it.
I never did
And
that.
whoever won. But
Just like Pogs.
yeah, and at first that's how it worked, and then everybody figured out rarity, and price guides started getting
Yeah,
published. You're
people were like, I'm not giving
no
that up."
freaking way. So that didn't happen anymore. But it was adaptable, and you'd play with your group of friends. You'd all kind of learn together, and it was almost like a kind of an insidious religion. You just sort of bring people into the fold, and you just milk money off of them there.
I can attest to that.
I spent thousands of dollars on Magic.
My parents.
I had a summer job, and I had school year jobs, and I spent thousands of dollars on Magic cards in high school. I think most of the money that I would have spent buying a car otherwise. I loved that game. It is, okay, all hyperbole aside, it is every bit as complex and beautiful a game as chess mathematically. It really is at its core built on an almost infinite series of possibilities, but it's comprehensible with a few core rules, and that's why it endures today.
Going aside the mechanics for a second, what I actually really enjoyed were the cards themselves. They had beautiful artwork on them by different artists, like a different spanning kind of like art styles, and they all had like little fluff text at the bottom.
Yeah,
and
text.
that was half of the fun of getting a new cards. It's just you go through and you read, and there'd be little stories in these, like even though like a sentence long, and by the time they had iterations of like Tempest series, and there were actual storylines going on through these cards. You could see in one card, like a white card, it would show a guy falling from a ship. The second card, a green card, would have him like landing in like a broken fall card.
Yeah.
It's like Snorlax waking up over the generations.
Yeah,
of
and you'd
Pokemon.
see it, and some of them would just have this wonderful random like flavor text from classical literature, like Coleridge, like they groaned, they stirred, they all uprose, none spake nor moved their eyes. You know, it had been strange even in a dream to see those dead men rise, and they would just stick this on the card. It was great.
Well, I hope 1993 Jared Petty kept enough money on hand for 1994, because in 1994 he would have been able to buy Donkey Kong Country, Super Metroid, the very same year, and a ticket to The Lion King.
Hakuna Matata.
Hakuna Matata, indeed.
The circle of life, Sam.
Oh, it is.
So check back in 1994, our next episode of The History of Awesome. Keep it awesome.